In my exclusive interview with Paul Krugman today, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, offering a very gloomy picture of the U.S. economy and really the need for more, not less, government spending.
We still have a deeply depressed economy. We've had a little bit of GDP growth, so we're not technically in a recession, but the job market is terrible. 5 people looking for jobs for every space available. Not making progress. Job growth is slowing, not accelerating. And this is exactly the kinds of conditions under which the government really needs to do its part by helping to sustain demand, keep the economy rolling.
Some would argue, though, we are better than we were certainly a couple of years ago or a year ago, and that the stimulus program that was put into effect has had an impact.
Oh, sure. I think without the stimulus, we would have been in much worse shape than we are. But the point is, the stimulus is starting to fade out right now. It was designed to do that, although some of us thought it was, both too small and too short-lived from the beginning. But anyway, it's starting to fade out. Inventory bounce. Firms no longer drawing down inventories has been giving us a lot of growth, but that's fading out. So here we are with 9.5% unemployment and no clear driver for job growth looking at forwards.
So in your view, in terms of the course of action that we're on right now, no doubt about it that we're headed back to the mistakes that Herbert Hoover made back in the 1930s.
Yeah, it's been amazing to me. If you read what people are saying or listen to what they're saying, read speeches by Jean-Claude Trichet of the European Central Bank, they're almost word for word from the speeches Herbert Hoover was giving in 1932 about how balancing the budget would restore confidence and that would cure the economy. We've gone right back. So it's a little bit, what's actually closer to is 37, when Roosevelt was persuaded to pull back and the economy went back into a second recession.
So no doubt about it in your view that that's where we're headed?
Well, no doubt. No, there's always some doubt. Something could come along, right? Something could come along and really drive spending. Some marvelous technological development could drive a big surge in investment spending. But looking ahead, you certainly don't want to count on that sort of thing, and there's nothing like that on the horizon. So we look weak.
Now, you have written, though, and I was kind of reading through a bunch of your stuff, that there are examples in history where spending cuts and tax increases were followed by economic growth. Why can't that be the case this time around?
Almost all of those examples were export-driven growth. Almost all of them were cases where the country in question devalued its currency or just was lucky to have neighboring economies that were growing rapidly. But this is a slump that affects the whole world. We can't all have export booms unless we can, find customers on Mars. So it's not relevant. It's not useful for our current circumstance. Also, in some cases, interest rates came way down because of improved, confidence. But, interest rates are under 3% right now.
So it is different this time around in terms of recovering from this recession?
Well, this is a coordinated global financial crisis. We don't have a lot of those. The last one we had was the 1930s. So you really need to look at the lessons from the 30s. You need to look, to a certain extent, at Japan in the 90s, which is a relatively inward-looking economy. These are the cases, and in this circumstance, fiscal austerity around the world is exactly the wrong thing to be doing right now.
And you don't argue that we're going to get a Great Depression. You talk about a long depression.
That's right. Think of, if you want a more recent example, of Japan's famous lost decade, which is now starting to go on. Most of the time in that lost decade, Japan was in technical recovery. That is, GDP was growing. The recessions were interludes, but the recovery periods were weak. The recession periods were severe, never made up the lost ground. Gradual slide into deflation. That's all of what we're looking at right now.
Well, how bad does it get then? Is it another Japan? I think people, you've actually written that people worry about we being like Greece, but Japan is the country we should be looking at more so.
Very much. We've been following on the Japanese track almost precisely. We've been having, some recoveries, but then turned to fiscal austerity way too soon. Prices, we came in with core inflation of around 2.5%. It's now down to 0.9. Give us another year and a half, we might well be in deflation. We're going to have to start calling my former department chairman Bernanke-san, because we're turning into very much a Japanese track.
What do you think about Ben Bernanke? What do you think he's thinking right now?
I don't know. I imagine, having known him and mostly knowing his academic work, that there's a reflationist inside him saying, no, we need to be doing more, but he can only only do what he can bring the Federal Open Market Committee with him to do. So I suspect he would like to do more than he's now doing, but I don't think he can.